This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Bess Lomax Hawes was an American folk musician, singer, and teacher who died in November at the age of 88. She came from a family of music historians. She helped her father and brother, John and Alan Lomax, collect folk music. John Lomax developed an archive of American folk song at the Library of Congress. In the 1940s, after college, Bess Lomax joined the Almanac Singers, a group that sang social protest songs. Other members included Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and Butch Hawes, who became her husband. The family later moved to California, where Bess taught music, including guitar and banjo. She also became an anthropology professor at what is now California State University, Northridge. In the 1970s, she worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. Later, she directed the Folk Arts program at the National Endowment for the Arts. She received the National Medal of Arts from President Bill Clinton in 1993. Daniel Sheehy is acting head of the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian. He worked with Bess Lomax Hawes and remembers how she worked to keep folk traditions from being lost. He said she found ways to help those voices, songs, stories, and craft traditions make it into the lives of a much broader public. Bess Lomax Hawes may be best remembered for a song from 1949. She and Jacqueline Steiner took old music and wrote new words for a campaign song. The song was to support Walter O'Brien, a Progressive Party candidate for mayor of Boston, Massachusetts. One of Mr. O'Brien's promises was to fight a fare increase on the transit system then known as the MTA. The song is about Charlie, a man who does not have enough money to leave the train, so he has to ride forever. Here is part of this funny song. Did he ever return? No, he never returned, and his fate is still unlearned. He may ride forever 'neath the streets of Boston. He's the man who never returned. The candidate lost, but the MTA song later became a huge hit with a version by the Kingston Trio. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. You can find transcripts, podcasts, and archives of our programs and links to our social media at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. An American nonprofit organization helps young people around the world to understand important issues and each other. The Global Nomads Group organizes educational video conferences. Students and speakers discuss subjects like AIDS, world religions, nuclear weapons, immigration, climate change, and politics. For example, students from at least 8 schools in Ghana talked with American students about the election and inauguration of President Obama. The Ghanaians took part from a distance learning center in Accra. Live coverage from Washington brought the energy from the streets to the classrooms, said a story in Modern Ghana News. The Global Nomads Group, or GNG, was started in 1998 by 4 university students. They wanted other young people to become more informed about the world. Programs have been held in more than 40 countries. The group says at least 10,000 students take part each year. Shirley Heron teaches high school in Magnolia, Texas. She says her school is not using the programs this year because of budget cuts. But she tells us in an email, a live conference feed was 100% better than a textbook. Magnolia is a small town, and for many of my students, this was an opportunity to travel around the world. One thing her students discovered is that they liked the same music and activities as many other young people around the world. The Global Nomads Group charges for programs, but says it tries to help schools with limited resources. In one program, students in Rwanda and at several American high schools asked each other questions. These included questions from Rwandan students about subjects like drug use, HIV/AIDS, and girls in school who get pregnant. An American boy asked about ethnic groups in Rwanda. He asked about the differences between the Tutsi and the Hutu. A girl in Rwanda answered, "There is no difference between the Hutus and the Tutsis. First of all, they are not 2 different tribes. We are one people. They are just ethnicities." At the end of the video conference, the Rwandan teacher made an announcement. She said, "In our culture, we never say goodbye, and we are going to entertain you. Thank you." And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Last week's report on bullying brought so many comments online, we are going to take this time to share some. One person who gave no name or country described an experience with a parent-teacher association. "I have been a victim of bullying in a PTA group. It is not just a problem for teenagers. Adults also engage in bullying activities, but it is usually verbal abuse by spreading lies to ruin your reputation or isolate the victim from the rest of the group. Since we are the role model of the next generation, our behavior will shape the future society." Vicky in Taiwan still remembers being scared by bullies in junior high school. And Jung Kim wrote, "Even we Koreans are made fun of by our own. If you're not cool with the popular people, you will be laughed at." Jeannie from Brazil says children should be taught to respect differences. And Kelly in the United States suggested that parents should spend more time with their children. If they are taught to be considerate when they are very young, they will not treat other people in a mean way. Joruji in Japan called for improving communication among students, parents, and teachers. Farshad, an Iranian in the United States, and Salim from France both suggested using psychologists in school to help control the problem. Some people complain that bullying is not always taken seriously. A commenter in Vietnam wrote, "We as parents and teachers should let children understand that they will be punished if they do wrong, and the punishments won't be only reminders or warnings." But not everyone agreed. Denisenko in Ukraine says what we call bullying is part of the socialization process. Children need to know how to defend oneself, how to establish relationships in a group. If laws or teachers or police will protect a child against bullying, he or she will never become an independent person. And several of you expressed sadness at the case of 15-year-old Phoebe Prince. Bullying may have led to her suicide. Monim Al-Hassi from Libya wrote, "I'm really astonished how such a beautiful, nice girl can do such a thing. She made a mistake when she listened to those who criticized her. They were jealous of her. God bless you, Phoebe Prince." You can find last week's report at voaspecialenglish.com. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Halt International Business School has campuses in Boston, San Francisco, London, Dubai, and Shanghai. The Halt Global Case Challenge is a competition based on the idea that solving world problems requires a good business plan. Teams compete for prizes of $1 million to help an organization with efforts to solve problems like hunger, poverty, and disease. A Halt student, Ahmad Ashkar, created the challenge for teams from business schools around the world. This year's challenge deals with poverty. Teams will compete to develop business plans for 3 non-governmental organizations. Solar Aid works on energy projects in East and Southern Africa. Habitat for Humanity builds low-cost housing. And 1 laptop per child builds computers for governments in developing countries to supply to poor communities. That group is taking part in the competition for the 2nd time. David Batley from Solar Aid says his group works with local entrepreneurs to bring power from the sun to rural communities. I think the winning team will be one that uses a combination of really innovative thinking and taking account of the practicalities of operating in Africa and the challenges that represents. Sandy Parakilas took part in the first competition in 2009. The challenge that year was to help an organization reach 100 million people in 5 years. One of the 3 top prizes went to his team from Carnegie Mellon University for their business plan for 1 laptop per child. They were struggling with competition from Microsoft and Intel, and they were having trouble basically making money. So it was a great opportunity for some business students to come in and create some ideas for a not-for-profit to be more profitable, essentially. Howard McNally is Chief Executive Officer of the Halt Global Challenge. He says, It's the equivalent of about 20,000 hours of consulting advice from the world's smartest, youngest people. Mr. McNally says the students learn about world problems and the opportunities that might be available for them in the market. And it's also a tremendous opportunity for the NGOs that we're working with to get the kind of advice that they're going to get about their vision and their goals. The 5 HALT campuses will hold regional competitions in February. Finalists will be chosen in New York in April. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama talked a lot about education in his State of the Union speech in January. He said, "We need to out-innovate, out-educate, and outbuild the rest of the world. If Americans want to win the future," he said, "then they also have to win the race to educate their children." The president said, over the next 10 years, nearly half of all new jobs will require education that goes beyond a high school education. And yet, as many as a quarter of our students aren't even finishing high school. The quality of our math and science education lags behind many other nations. America has fallen to 9th in the proportion of young people with a college degree. 2 years ago, Mr. Obama set a goal to regain the world's highest rate of college graduates by 2020. He says the responsibility to give every child a chance to succeed begins not in classrooms, but in homes and communities. He said, "Only parents can make sure the TV is turned off and homework gets done. We need to teach our kids that it's not just the winner of the Super Bowl who deserves to be celebrated, but the winner of the science fair." President Obama talked about his Race to the Top competition. It offered states money to develop plans to improve teacher quality and student performance. Also, he called for preparing 100,000 new teachers in science, technology, engineering, and math over the next 10 years. Mr. Obama offered to begin debate with Congress on immigration reform, and he linked that issue to education. He said, "Today, there are hundreds of thousands of students excelling in our schools who are not American citizens. Some are the children of undocumented workers. They grew up as Americans and pledge allegiance to our flag, and yet they live every day with the threat of deportation. Others come here from abroad to study in our colleges and universities. But as soon as they obtain advanced degrees, we send them back home to compete against us." The speech came the same day the Education Department released the latest results on student progress in science. The goal is for all students to perform at the proficient or advanced level. But only about 1/3 of students in grades 4 and 8 and 1/5 of 12th graders did that in 2009. Just 1 to 2% of students performed at the advanced level. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Dyslexia is a problem that interferes with the ability to recognize words and connect sounds with letters when people read. People with this learning disorder may also have problems when they write. Dyslexia is not related to eyesight or intelligence. The problem involves areas of the brain that process language. Brain scientists are studying whether they can predict which young children may struggle with reading in order to provide early help. John Gabrielli at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is leading a study of 5-year-olds in about 20 schools in the Boston area. He says, "We partner with schools that have kindergartens, and in this study, what we do is, for all the children whose parents permit them to participate, we give them a brief set of paper and pencil tests to look at which children appear to be at some risk for struggling to read." So far, 50 of the kindergartners have been examined in a machine that shows brain activity. The goal is to study 500 children using fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. The scanner uses a high-energy magnetic field and radio waves to look inside the body. Written tests are not always able to identify dyslexia or other problems. Professor Gabrielli says children can differ a lot in their abilities from day to day. He says brain scans may offer a more scientific way to identify problems. And with reading problems, he says, early identification is important. All the literature is that for intervention, behavioral programs, educational programs that help children overcome reading difficulties, the younger the child, the more effective they are. Reading problems are not usually identified until a child is in the 3rd or 4th grade. The longer the wait before children are recognized as poor readers, he says, the less these interventions can help. And, as Professor Gabrielli points out, poor reading can make education a struggle. Reading is everything. Even math and science have textbooks. During the brain imaging, the children are given tasks related to reading. They work with letters and sounds of language. The brain scans measure the extent to which certain parts of the brain become active while the children do the work. The neuroscientists say they are pleased with the early results, but still have a lot more work to do on the study. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. For more education news, plus activities for learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.